Meeting come to order. Are we gonna do a roll call? Are you the new girl?
Yes.
What's your name?
Jana.
Jana, okay.
Yes.
Well, welcome
Thanks.
to our disorganization here. You can go ahead and do the roll call for us.
All right, Pete Palace.
Here.
Wade Coleman.
Here.
Aldo Revito. Greg Shue.
Here.
Johnny Kane.
Here.
Sylvia Pate.
Here.
Mark Francis.
Here.
Did I miss anyone?
No, looks like everybody. Okay, any public comments? I guess not, huh? No public in here. And, do we have to approve the minutes? I don't have a thing.
I don't have an agenda. I'm just trying to find it.
You got it there, Sue?
Email.
All right, we don't have a copy of the minutes here.
I got a copy.
You got a copy? Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Did everybody get a chance? I perused them while did you get a chance to look at them on your email? I guess we need to do that then. You want to pass this down here so Greg can look at it? We'll skip.
Y'all don't have to approve this. You can approve what's that next.
Okay. Did everybody have a chance to look over them when we got them in the email? I know I did, but Greg could look at. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sylvia. Everybody else, get a chance to look at them? Did you look at them? Got them right here.
Thank you.
Are there any comments on the minutes? Any, motion to approve them?
So
I'll
moved.
make a motion.
And second? Second. All right, wait a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, that passes. All right, and then, the stormwater runoff percentage increase. Is that what this is right here, stormwater runoff?
Mm-hmm.
So, is Tim gonna give us something on that?
You just started looking at it.
Yeah, he has that page.
All right, I guess we wait on him to come back. Okay, we're ready for your, presentation.
Are you?
Yeah, we approved the minutes.
Okay. All right. Y'all aware, I brought y'all last week on last month's agenda, there was the recommendation that we go from 30% maximum impervious surface to a 40%. And told y'all I'd bring y'all some information back, and that's what we have on this presentation. I can probably do this better if I can move around. There's a couple of things in here, but there is a consistency statement y'all got to consider at the end. If you decide to send it forward and approve it and send it to the Board of Commissioners, when you send it forward, the Board of Commissioners will then look at this, probably the same presentation that y'all have, unless y'all make any different changes or recommendations. In this presentation, I've actually included the changes in the ordinance. You can see both at the same time, what we have and what we're proposing to change. And we made it pretty clear so it's easy to figure out. And we'll talk about anything that you want to talk about. All right, so the staff proposal to increase manageable stormwater, this is actually more brought to us by attrition over time. Me and Rhonda actually recognized that this was a potential issue. And as we get into it, you'll see where the problems were. But at the current ordinance, R157-060 has a maximum lot coverage of 30%. And then we have that graduated decrease that we approved when we were dealing with the big houses, which is 4,000 to 5,000 square feet is 25%, over 5,000 is 20% contained on site. If you'll see that R 157-058 and R2 157-061, they have a maximum of 30% contained on site, and those are multifamily or commercial. So there's no graduated scale there because we were only trying to deal with those large houses, and it makes no sense in the other fashion. Commercial, the commercial must be designed to control the first 1.5 inches of rainfall within a 24-hour period within the property boundaries contained on site. Well, that's exactly the same criteria that we make for the 30%, except for we just have a maximum, you have to contain it on site, and it's the first inch and a half in a 24-hour period. That's how they designed the system. After that, it's a graduated flow into the street, because that's all it's designed for. Okay? Most all of them are designed for that. Land disturbing activity over an acre requires a state permit from DEQ or DENR, and so that would fall outside our purview. So if you got a place here that's got more than an acre or more, and you start to do land disturbing activity that's not R1 or not residential, that where you're disturbing it, not just where the house is at, but the whole park is more than an acre, you'd have to have a state stormwater permit. That's everywhere, that's state law. Our ordinances, in case no one knows, the history is that the state always required that, and then sometime around 97, 98, they required every municipality to have what they call phase 2 stormwater, which was their own stormwater rules and regulations to deal with. So you had to have something. And most everybody went with the 1.5 inches in a 24-hour period. Most of them still do. We'll talk about other places. All right. This is the stormwater management section. It says the central environmental goal of the town is to restore and preserve water quality. And then, of course, I'm not going to read that red line, but the red line is the most important part of it. And then this goes on to regulate existing development and to establish the authority of the town to administer and enforce stormwater regulations. And then the C is an important part because it says to create public education programs so that the citizens of town will have knowledge of how to reduce and prevent pollution in their homes and businesses. Now we have, that section shows up several times, that part, C part shows up several times in the ordinance, also shows up in our CAMA land use plan. All right, general requirements, 158.04. This is the ordinance. It says all visitors and residents, business owners, developers, and others who utilize the resources of the town shall take all reasonable measures to minimize the potential flooding and protect surface waters and the property of others from damage resulting from their activities. It says whenever a conflict exists between the federal, state, or local laws and this chapter, the more restrictive provisions shall apply. And that happens a lot of times with camping. Because you can't do anything, you can't put a stormwater system in the CAMA 30-foot buffer. That's just an example. It says any penalties imposed by the town shall be in addition to the penalties imposed by the state, county, or federal government. So if you don't follow the rules and you happen to fall inside of ours and inside of the states, everybody's fine. Current ordinance regulates, and this is important, the development that does not require state permits. So our ordinance covers that. That was required by the phase 2 statutes. And anything under an acre. It says individual lots outside of a DEQ approved subdivision formed prior to the state's DEQ rules implementation. And then it says the improvement to lots that fall under category 1 and 2 that increase current impervious area. So that's where our ordinance would apply. So if you wanted to, if you've got a house and you want to increase the size of the house and you want to make more impervious area, then our ordinance would apply. Okay? If you want to build a house and you've got a vacant lot and it's less than an acre that you're disturbing, then our ordinance would apply. Okay. The intent of these regulations is to satisfactorily control stormwater on an individual parcel of land and areas in between, says to not adversely affect the quantity and quality of the surface water flows as a result of natural rainfall. And control the runoff onto adjacent properties where water-induced soil erosion in any form. Because of the low-lying nature of the barrier island upon which the town is situated, it is important that surface water runoff be controlled as much as reasonably possible within the property boundaries and not drained into adjacent areas, both private and public, for example, streets and roads. This is important. This is important to the increase that we're talking about, and here's why. If we're not relying on an engineered system to contain the first inch and a half within a 24-hour period, we're relying on sheet flow, which we're relying on something that hasn't been engineered and is not, we don't know if that lot's holding water or if that lot's draining water. It could be better than an engineered system, or it could be worse. But what we do know is that the 30% has been engineered to the engineered standards, which also those standards have to meet DEQ standards for infiltration and that kind of thing. And we've got an example. All right, so what's built upon area? This is very important. There's that portion of an individual development project that is covered by impervious or partially impervious cover, including buildings, pavements, compacted soils, including coquina and marl, recreation facilities, gravel roads, and parking areas, and the like. Uncovered wood slatted decks and the water area of a swimming pool are not considered to be built upon areas. Everybody understand that? A swimming pool is considered pervious. And the reason being is that just about all of them have the ability to do what within a 24-hour period?
Hold an inch on the edge.
Contain an inch and a half. Unless they can keep it at the level at the rim, and everybody's gonna regulate that. So what's not built upon area is that uncovered wood slatted deck and the water area of a swimming pool are not considered to be built upon areas. Note, everything else must be approved by the planning director or designee for use. And the reason being is that when we get into the ordinance, you're gonna see anything that's considered a pervious product has to be approved by me or Carrie. You just don't get to decide you're gonna use it, it has to be approved. Approved in our ordinance means by the authority having the jurisdiction, which would be me or her. Okay. Staff proposal. We are proposing to increase the allowed percentage of impervious coverage built upon area from 30% to 40%. So right now, what we have is a 30%, once you get to that 30%, you're done. And what you have to do is that 30%, all of it has to be contained on site. So if you look in there, you'll see there's an example. Wade used to get these, but there's an example of what we require in order for you to get a permit. And then we have to get a letter from the engineer stating that it has been installed per those standards. Okay, so the system is designed to handle the rainfall, and it's designed to contain that on site. And what the engineer does is they actually either know the conditions of the soil, they test the conditions of the soil, because the depth of that determines the flow into the channel and the types of system that they use. Okay. Before I go any further, the town's having a stormwater study done right now, and it's being done by Michael Norton, who's the engineer of record for that. And I spoke to him about this, and he gave me some information, and we both came to the same conclusion that there's really no difference between 30 and 40%. The only difference is the graduated unknown of the 10% that flows, sheet flows into both the canals and others that no longer would happen. In other words, you're containing it. So it really doesn't change anything. What does change is that there's a magnification of that if you have a storm event or a flood event.
Mhm.
Where you start getting 6 and 7 and 8 inches. Proposed changes. All right, so 157.058 states that lot coverage of main structure shall not exceed 40% of the platted lot. It did say 30. All impervious structures outside the main structure shall not exceed 40% of the buildable land plus area of the main structure. All health department and camera requirements must also be met. Open decks are not considered in the allowable coverage percentage. That's because open decks are what? They're not built upon area. All right? Of the main structure. But they must meet all setback requirements. Now, that is not exactly true because an open deck at the ground level doesn't have to meet setbacks. A ground level deck does not have to meet setbacks. There's nothing that even talks about it. Plus ground level decks, and the way you can test this, the only thing you gotta meet is the FEMA requirements. There is no building codes for a ground level deck. But they have to meet the FEMA requirements for obstructions, right? under technical bulletin number 5. So we require them to be permitted so we can see how they're installed, to make sure they're not obstructions, but there's no building codes, and they're on the ground. All right, gravel, sand, and grass areas are considered pervious. An approved pervious product shall be allowed to cover any portion of the remaining 40% of the allowed built upon area. And then it says, see definition of approved pervious product. Okay, before we go any further, let me give you an example. The parts that we took out there do not work. We have never allowed more than 30%, and this was based off of several stormwater engineers that we talked to, based on this ordinance as it was written, because it talks about the usable area of the platted lot. Well, that's everything in the setbacks, which means that if you use 30% of what's in the setbacks, you're not allowed to have anything in the right-of-ways in most of the areas, and you can't have something in the setbacks, and this doesn't allow you to use anything in the setbacks, because that's the way it's written, then you were really stuck with whatever percentage that you used. So it was confusing language. Me and Ron, for years, wanted to get rid of it. We tried several different ways, but now's the time to get it out of it. And what this does is it gives us more control over all of it. And here's why. If we go to 40%, we're now got 10% more that we're actually containing on site, and we're keeping it. And written like this, that would mean that if you had 30%, you had 10% left, right? And you wanted to use a pervious product, right, that is, say, 90% pervious, then we could approve that, right, up to the last 10% is used to make your 40%. And that is more than acceptable under stormwater standards or any other means. So that last part was supposedly meant to help do that, but the way it was written, it didn't let you do anything in any setbacks. So or any area that couldn't be built upon. So most people build their house to what? To take up the maximum amount of lot coverage that they can, which left nowhere for any other impervious area. So if they had an area where they could have put some impervious area, you know what I mean? They couldn't even plan for it, really. They did have a little bit of concrete in front, kind of thing. This will help a lot with that. It'll change the aesthetics and a whole lot of other things. All right, so this is 157. The next one's a little more complicated. This is 157.060, which is the one we started with. And basically what we did here was we graduated that percentage increase right along with the larger homes. And that way we could just keep it uniform. This was actually we had to make sure that this was done the right way. So the only way that I would recommend this is to do it just the way we have, is graduated, because this was vetted through the attorneys, and it was vetted through the School of Government to make sure that this wasn't considered a taking of the properties when we rewrote this by the percentages. And if you were involved in it back then, you would remember how much work was done to get that. But all we did was take those percentages and increase them by the same amount. That's what we did. Hoping that, you know, that won't get challenged, and I don't think it will. So then we've got the same language beyond where it stops as the percentage increase. That language doesn't change, it just stays the same. And then, of course, the other one is, the next one is the same, it's the same as 1.058, which is basically that same language. And as you can see, we just changed the wording so that we can get it where we use it maximum. All right, so now other municipalities, this is what they have. Ocean Isle Beach is at 50% max, allows for impervious product and stormwater engineering. So they're at 50%, basically doing the same thing that we're talking about doing. Sunset Beach is at 45%, and then all other. In other words, you can cover the whole lot, as long as you contain it. So you got a maximum of 45%, and then and all other has to be contained with the first 1.5 inches in a 24-hour period. And then Oak Island, they just do the whole thing. Whatever you got that's impervious, you have to contain the first 1.5 inches in a 24-hour impervious area. Can I tell you that Oak Island probably has the most strenuous, that's probably the most strenuous. Where you gonna find the land? If you look at that, I think it's on that one, the one we gave you, you can see, and Wade can attest to, and anybody else in here can attest to how much area you gotta have just for the 30%. You gotta have a pretty good sized trench and ditch and location to contain it. That right there is almost more restrictive, because that doesn't care. You gotta contain it. So if you start dumping them, you're not gonna be able to put but so much on that property, and you're gonna have to have an engineer design the whole lot. Yeah, I wanna have as much as I can get, well, you just paid a whole bunch of money and used up a whole bunch of land, you could probably put a house on. You know what I mean? So that's probably the most stringent of all of them. Ocean Isle is probably the most lenient. Sunset Beach is probably pretty stringent too, because they start trying to find area for all that extra that they don't cover. So,
Can I ask, in a situation where the entire lot does get covered with impervious material,
we could.
the engineer could still design a system to hold the runoff stormwater under the impervious material, correct?
No,
You can't drain and hold it underneath?
it would only be determined if you got several factors. And factor number one would be the type of soil, whether you can drink it on. See, so that's what I'm saying, is that first you gotta find a lot that can take every bit of it. And then you've got it's got to be able to seep in and handle that. You follow what I'm saying? So a lot of times you can't find a lot that you can completely cover. So you're not gonna be able to build the system. You can build it that way, but can you make the system work? And is an engineer gonna sign off on it? Very rare.
Mhm.
Because if you look at the 30%, what you have to do, if you start increasing, see, that's gonna be another thing too. Us going to 40% ain't gonna guarantee that somebody with a 50 by 100 lot that's on a canal is gonna be able to go more than 30%. Because they may not have the land to build the system to accept it.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
They may only be able to go to 35%. We're saying you've got a maximum of 40%, but our ordinance says you have to maintain your stormwater, right, on your site. So if your site can't handle more than 30%, that's all you're getting. You know, what I mean, unless the engineer can figure out how to design it. Because you can't dump it in the canal, you can't dump it in the street, because that's what the ordinance says. That's why you see, sometimes you'll see us making people put, you ever rode down the beach and go, well, I know Wade deals with this, but we make you put up a retaining wall, right, Wade? So that water don't go over on other people's property. So now, you gotta keep it on your property, even though you've got a containment system for the impervious area, everything else got to stay on there. Because the ordinance won't let it go. So it's not like you get to let 20% flow off while you contain 80. It's there. And they have to take that into account, so the whole lot gets taken into account, and then what you can dump inside of it. So the recommendation by staff, the town's planning staff recommends the increase for the following reasons: to assist older homes with non-conformance issue when trying to renovate. It adds to the tax base and increased structural value and ad valorem tax base, has a positive economic impact, and allows stormwater management and regulations on structures that previously did not participate. And that last line goes all the way back to that first line I was telling you about. Because here's what we have. We have a percentage, I don't know what they are, but it's a high percentage of older structures that don't participate in the 30% stormwater runoff. And they will never participate because when they come in here, okay, we got 30%. They come in here, they want to renovate, their house is already over 30%, but they're not participating. But guess what we can't do? We can't let them renovate because they're non-conforming, and they're adding to the non-conformance of what? The stormwater. So now they're never going to participate, right? But if they're allowed to add to the structure, they will have to what then? Comply with the stormwater.
Mhm.
So now, we've got, where we did have 30% or 35% that was never going into the ground, with sheet flowing into the street, we've now allowed them to go to 40%, and now they're containing it on site.
That's a plus.
That is a plus. You can't go wrong. And I can't tell you the number of times, I know that me and Wade's been involved in the field, number of times that we've had to tell people, you can't build that, it's non-conforming. Number one, you're already over your 30% coverage area. And with the changes in the ordinance, we can help even more, because now, if they're at 31%, they only want to go to 35%, and then they want to not have to dig up their driveway they already had, because nobody's going to dig their driveway up to add a bedroom. Okay? Now, if they want to, they'll be able to keep that and get larger and start containing the stormwater. It's never been before. I don't know what the percentage is, but as I was riding around today, I can tell you every one of them old shotgun houses that's still over here, ain't none of them participate. No. I saw one the other, we all seen some of them where they're just dumping them right out the eaves, you know, thing is like, you know, I mean, it's got a gutter, but it's just
Mhm.
never was in the system. On the ground, that's even worse, right in the buffer. So that's even bad. So what we have now, I guess I didn't add it in there, that's the end of it, that's the staff recommendation. This, do y'all have any questions? Have any more questions? Do you have any questions? Okay, by law, and I talked about it a little bit, but on the document you have, that has Pete's name on it, spelled right. This is the consistency statement that we're required by law whenever you change the land use ordinance. The planning board has to write a consistency statement, or approve a consistency statement, and then this gets sent to the board of commissioners. And what this does is, by law, once y'all approve this and send it to them, they have to review it, they have to publicly consider it, and they have to look at it before they can ever approve the changes in that ordinance that we've written. So basically, it just as it reads, it says, the Town of Holden Beach Planning and Zoning Board is reviewed and hereby recommends approval of amendments to chapter 157.058 C7A, which is the first one I showed you, 157.060 B7A, which is the second, and 157.061 D6A of the zoning ordinance regarding stormwater management under chapter 158.01 of the town's ordinances. It says, after review, the planning and zoning board has found that the recommended amendments are consistent with the adopted county land use plan and are considered reasonable and in the public's interest for the following reasons. Now, yeah, if there's any question about the county land use plan, I was involved with it from day one. What you want?
Mhm.
It says, use of property, it says the guidelines as written have no evidentiary benefit to the introduction and encouragement to improve property for better stormwater retention. That's actually in the land use plan. Chapter 6, it says tools for managing and development and stormwater management plan and ordinance, which states the intent of the ordinance is to control stormwater as much as possible on site. I don't think we're doing that now, the way we're doing it. Economics impacts, I think we explained that a little bit. It says, but the county land use plan goals and objectives both identify the need to balance new development and redevelopment with a balance between land and conservation while maintaining the family-friendly atmospheres established under the objectives of 5.1. By allowing an additional 10%, we can provide for small redevelopment of properties, encourage participation by property owners in stormwater management activities outlined under 158.01, where it's talking about fixing the problems and education. Those non-conforming lots who have no stormwater and are above the existing 30% often go undeveloped and may never participate because of the unintended reduction in use of properties. And that happened with phase 2, and most of those houses fell under that, you know what I mean, were built before that. Environmental impacts, it will provide better stormwater management within the corporate limits of the town of Holden Beach by minimizing sheet flow and utilizing engineered stormwater control, stormwater management under 3.1J of the policy. All these I'm citing actually come out of the county land use plan. And then, of course, it says upon approval of the Board of Commissioners, the comprehensive plan will be deemed amended and should not require any additional request or application for amendment. And so, if y'all want to adopt the consistency statement, you can. You have to do it by motion, and of course, Pete has to sign it if y'all do. So, is there any questions about any of that? Okay.
No discussion? If everyone say anything about it before we make a motion here?
Seems
We
pretty
probably got the
straightforward.
most experience.
Well,
in
it's,
it.
I mean, it's a plus for everybody, especially the older homes that are flooding each other, flooding their next door neighbor. You know, that's what Tim pointed out, a lot of times we live next to them, we have to build retaining walls to stop the water. When we're doing what we're supposed to anyway, we have to spend extra money building retaining walls to contain the 30% on the lot. so we don't flood them because they're non-compliant anyway. So it helps everybody.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. I agree with that. Does anybody want to make a motion that we accept the consistency statement? Is that right? Tim, is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, what you wanna do is make a motion to accept the changes to the ordinance, the ones that had the red lines in them. Accept the changes to the ordinance and to approve the consistency statement. That's what you're doing.
I'll make a motion, we accept the changes to the ordinance and accept the consistency statement.
Anybody second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passed by unanimous vote. I guess I need to sign this thing. I'll go with it. So should I put unanimous vote,
6-0?
Yep.
6-0?
Yep. I'll need a copy of that.
Here, you can just have this one. Right?
Give it to Jen.
Here you go, Jan. Okay, so,
Thanks for that, Tim.
yeah, that was great.
I think that's gonna make as big an impact as when we changed the way we measured height. We changed everything when we did that. The height thing was the best thing we ever did because it created better architectural features all the way across the island. Every house is built better from this is gonna have an equal opportunity and help as well, I think. We're gonna see a lot of good things after that.
So we did something.
It sounds good.
Okay,
Good
so,
idea,
Yeah.
People talk about us for years.
yeah, for your
Here, say, what took you so long?
Okay, next item 5 is presentation for possible action of pier head alignment.
Okay, after being told about this, and I think we had 1 or 2 complaints, I don't know, but it came to us that we needed to do this, and so staff took it up off of the request of a board member. We were under the impression, after having numerous conversations, that a lot of other people had pier head ordinances. My research has resulted in none of that. Even the people that told me they were enforcing other people's stuff couldn't produce it. So what I did find was Ocean Isle does have they have a ordinance that, I don't know if it's an ordinance or if it's a reaction to the same thing we had, a complaint, but it's an ordinance, and I'll share it with you. Because short of doing this, I think we're gonna be in a long haul to try to figure out how to develop a pier head alignment based off of our canal situation and the fact that whenever the ordinance was written, it wasn't until I got here in 2010 that there was an enforcement of that ordinance, and the canals ended up locks looked like this because they didn't bulkhead when the ordinance was written. So they lost part of their properties, and then of course that changes how far out from the property line is, or how far it is to the center of the channel. But anyway, here's what I got. Ocean Isle has a 20-foot navigable channel, 10 feet on either side of the center. It shall be established within the natural and concrete canals, and a 12-foot clear navigable channel, 6 feet on either side of the center, shall be established within the T's of the canal. And that seems pretty simple to do. But then they said, for all you people that don't like it, that rule,
Here's another part of the ordinance. Don't laugh when y'all hear this. I read this and thought I was gonna die. In an effort to ensure the property owner flexibility in the size of the watercraft he wishes to dock, either permanently or temporarily, the establishment of this navigational channel will provide a clear zone of travel in the canals. Should the property owner already own or wish to purchase a watercraft that would interfere with the navigational channel, the property owner would have the option of decreasing the width and/or design of his dock.
So if I want a bigger boat, I have to have a smaller dock?
Yeah, you gotta bring the dock back. You know what bigger boats mean in the canals when you bring the dock back? It's gonna be sitting in the mud.
Yeah.
So, the only thing I can say is that we could probably do this, but it's gonna be like so many other things, we're gonna be the first ones to do it, and I'm gonna need some time.
Will CAMA have anything to do with it?
Well, CAMA will enforce it once CAMA apparently enforces this. Whenever they take into consideration, well, the first thing they'll do is that once people start bringing their docks back, they won't let the next person go out past them. See, CAMA will keep the piers in line.
That's what they do.
The new complaint came, folks, the complaint that we have now came from the fact that somebody has a huge boat in the T part of the canal and can't get by somebody else who decided to buy a big boat. See, so they recognized what the real problem was because they apparently had the same complaints. What we're trying to do, in my opinion, is we're trying to develop a pier head, and the person that brought this to me was also under the impression that everybody had one but us. But we can't find them. We haven't found them. I did hear that Ocean Isle has Sunset has a subdivision that has one. I think I heard that from Pat or Rob. But that would be a private, not a municipal thing. This is municipal, and we could go with the channel. If that's what y'all want to do, I'll run with the channel, but other than what they've written, I don't know what else you could write. You know what I mean? We could probably leave the last paragraph out, and then I could tell them that when they got mad. But, I mean, I don't know what that last part means, but you know what I mean? That just explains that reads like, we're gonna make this ordinance for this one guy, and here's what you can do if you don't like it. That's what it reads like.
How would you address that going forward if you did that now?
Come on, this?
The docks are in place when they come time to repair them. So
Well,
that because everybody's,
Well, the problem is that this doesn't do anything with the dock. This basically says you can have a dock, within 4 feet if you want to put a 4-foot boat on. It's the boat that has to keep the clear channel. That's what this says. Not the dock.
Yeah.
If you want a bigger boat, you can bring your dock back. So this is for the clear part for you to navigate in and out. They don't care where the docks are at. They want the boat to be clear.
So you gotta know what kind of boat you're gonna have for your
And not only that, Tim's Navy's got to patrol the canals every day.
You're gonna have to have a boat. Town's got to have a boat.
Tim's Navy's got to.
Oh my gosh.
But my point being is that this is the best I can, remember I told you I was gonna bring y'all some stuff back, and I did call every one of them, and I did look at every ordinance I could. I even went as far as Nags Head.
Any of the ones we've done over here, CAMA has told us where we can stop.
That's right. Well, see, they try to keep them in line.
Try to keep them in line, which
See,
doesn't work.
and for the most part, they have. For the most part, they've kept them in line. But I think they could probably, if we were to do this, then what would happen is that if people got bigger boats, they would gradually bring them back, and then the next guy would have to come back with them that wanted to repair or get another one. So you could actually, now, I'm just saying this, if you wanted to decide how big the boats could be, you know what I mean? Then you could have a clear width from the center of the channel to the edge of the dock. If you wanted to come up with what you think is and present it, that's gonna meet with it. That means everybody that has a boat that's larger than what you're, you know what I mean? Then what that would do is make everything out there that's non-conforming. And you could do like we did, the walkways and other things, like the swimming pools, and other stuff. You could, well, the walkway's the best example. And we wrote an ordinance after a storm where all that debris was at, that basically said if you had any section of a walkway that was on the other side of the town's frontal dune that was more than 4 feet wide, you had until 2003 to get it tore down. So you could do the same thing here. You could say the edge of your floating dock can only be, has to be this far from the center line of the channel. You know what I mean? And then that would solve the problem of the zigzag, because the channel center doesn't change. And what would happen is that the center channel, the channel center can be determined from the right of way, because it won't change. The line won't change in, you know what I mean, in measurement to there. So you could measure to the right of way and back out, and that would tell you where you're at. Or from your area to the edge of your dock, or from your dock to there, then you can measure from your dock out to the outside. But you could do that. You could write the ordinance and then say nobody's grandfathered you. You got 10 years to comply or something like that. Or you could write it and say until you considered it to be 50% damaged or 50% improved, that it can remain like it is. So I'm open to suggestions.
How big of an issue do you think this is? I mean, are we spending this time discussing this for the benefit of 3 people on the island?
You know, you do remember that I was the one that said the big house wasn't an issue too, and we ended up writing all these rules that's never once applied, because I said it was never gonna be an issue, because nobody's gonna run out there and build houses like that, because there weren't that big a market for it. It was a fad. We've had 2 of them built since the island's been here. One of them was built like 12 years before the last one. So, if you want my opinion is that people are buying bigger boats, and it might be a problem, but I only know of 2, maybe 3 complaints. And they all came in at one time.
Okay.
And I'm not sure they're not on, they may be on different canals, but I think they're on different streets, the same canal. Which tells you there's a common problem in there somewhere. But
So there's nothing in the ordinance now that says there needs to be a navigable lane in the channel. And that's
Not that
basically
I-
what
not
we're
that I'm
saying.
aware of, not that I'm aware of.
That's basically what we're saying. We need to have a navigable from the center point of the channel. I think it's reasonable to have that.
Well, if you have a navigable channel, you just point out it's got to be 20 feet, right? Somebody's got to enforce that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, that's probably the most logical way to do it, because, you know, I mean, the other way is, like I said, you're gonna require a property owner to hire a surveyor to put in to figure out where the center line of the channel is in order to keep the pier in the same location. I don't know how you, because see, you gain and lose property based off the high water mark, based off of what was done on the properties before. That line is not constant on the edge, the high water mark is not constant. In other words, when you lose it to public trust water, it now belongs to me and you, not to
That
them.
wouldn't be, but your navigable area would, that line would be.
It would
The
stay.
navigable area of the center of the channel, the part that gets dredged, you know what I mean, is probably the part that you, not only can you establish, but probably enforce. Because see, some of these lots, the property lines still go out there, and it's not their property as long as it's wet. If they ever start building up, then they would gain their property back. So, that's not a problem. I'm saying that, but that's not really a problem. The problem is figuring out how to establish either a pier head line or a navigable channel, and which one we think would be best to regulate the problem that we're not real sure what it is. The problem is that people are claiming that the piers are getting too far out into the canal. But the problem I see is the complaints, is that the piers appear to be close, you know what I mean? Some of them are further out, some of them are back in, but they appear to be not, maybe 2 feet. The problem seems to be the boats.
I think you're right. I think it's more the boats than it is the piers.
Yeah, I do too. And I think to have an ordinance that says that that there's a navigable channel through down the, inlet of the canal is reasonable. And that, you know, if they get to squabbling, then they can say, okay, well, look, here's what it says. And you're not complying with that, you need to fix that.
So, I'm just saying, that would probably be the easiest way to write a rule, but I don't know who or how you would enforce it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, which way is easier to enforce? I mean,
See, the easier way to enforce would be able to establish a line, but that would be the most expensive for the property owner.
mhm.
And that's gonna be expensive for the town, because we're gonna have to survey each of those channels and determine where that center line is, and then determine from some other line where the pier head would be. And it can't be from the center of the channel, because nobody can measure from the center. You'd have to have a survey in the center of the channel every time.
When they do that, there is no set center of that channel.
Is that right?
So there's not one. So the only way that they determine that is they average what's out there already,
Right. That's because it goes in and out.
because it goes in and out, so they just average it. Any riparian rights survey, that's what they do.
So what they always did was they tried to keep them in line. Camel, they tried to keep them in line with whichever one bumped out. And so what's happened is that maybe one or two of them got bumped out, you know, a foot or two, you know, either by attrition, or maybe they were all the way out there already and they got repaired, or that kind of thing. Well, when we went out there, where supposedly they went out too far.
Yeah.
What we saw was a boat on a boat lift that had been bought, that was brand new, that was sticking 5 feet off the boat lift out into the channel. It wasn't really the docks, it was sticking out way past, but you see my point? That's what we saw. And beyond that was the person that was complaining, and that was a damn cabin cruiser.
She knew which one you're talking
He's
So the
been back
question
and with it.
is, it seems like to me, the question is, can you legislate someone's boat size?
No, I don't think you can, but I think you can legislate their dock size.
And where they,
Well, what I'm saying is, if they
Well, I think
go,
what
if
Wade was
they
saying-
start with a big boat and they decide to downsize, they can extend their dock?
That's right. I think that's what Wade's saying. See, what this does is this says if you want a big boat, you get a small dock. You want a big dock, you get a small boat. So it's the dock that dictates, because you gotta stay away from the navigable channel. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the boat or not. The boat, it becomes the measuring point. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I get it, it's just, I mean,
I
if
do
they're
too.
transitory, you know, like, it could be a different boat every week.
Okay. Well, then and that's a difficulty, right? So then, I guess, as a planning board, y'all need to decide whether we want to go, if y'all decide that we need to determine the center of the channel and determine the line so that we can have a pier head, a line, then y'all need to tell me so I can take that to the board, because somebody's gonna have to generate some funds for some surveys. We can't spend money. My professional line item service line item is gone at the end of the year, and next year it's all been allocated already.
I think it is an issue as time goes by, on and on. It is getting worse. I mean, I don't have a dog in the fight, I don't have a
Same.
boat or, you know, but I do see it. And there's some of them closed up pretty good, you can barely pass them.
But people are gonna keep buying bigger boats, right?
Well, that's it.
Well,
Once you get
it
bigger.
looks to me like you could, well, maybe the idea is both. Maybe they have the clear width channel and a pier head. Then the bigger boat, then the piers would all be in line, and then if the bigger boat gets bought, right? Then I guess they would be sighted and take it back to the dealer and say, hey, I'm sorry, you didn't tell me. It had a boat that big.
Let me return this thing.
Maybe we should get some info from the folks that live on the canals and have the problem. I mean, I just moved to the canal, so I know, I've got this issue, so I can relate to what some of those people that live on the canals might have to say about this issue.
So what do you think it was?
Some of them have an issue with it, I know, and I know one that, my daughter lives on one end, and I know going down into the canal where she's at, there's a huge boat that sits there all the time, and you can hardly even get around it. And it's probably the one you're talking about, and
That's
it's
perfect.
a pain in the, you know what, to get around it. It really is, and it just sits there all the time. But on my canal, we don't seem to have any problem. We get along. I think it may be the people on, for the most part, maybe most of the canals kind of just get along with each
So
other.
Do y'all think, so what do y'all think? Do y'all think you want to engage the public to see what the input is?
Well, here's the-
I mean, I hate to come up with recommendations for people that live on canals that, you know, other people don't have any, like you said, a dog in the fight. But, I mean, I would be curious to know what they might perceive it as being a problem or not being a problem. I mean, I'll come up with some new rule if the majority of people don't think it's an issue. I mean,
Is there a way,
it's kind of mind-boggling in a way.
is there a way that each canal community can establish its own set of rules?
Public work,
Yeah,
we'd have to do it,
yeah.
yeah.
So this is oversimplifying it, but we're gonna attempt to write some sort of rule or regulation that should be more of a common sense, good neighbor policy. That, you know, I shouldn't buy a super sized yacht and put it in my canal because it's just too big, and I should have common sense to know that my neighbors can't get by, and I shouldn't do that. So and then you're gonna have to go out there and enforce it and say, hey man, your boat's too big, your dock's too long.
And it's not just the dock, it's the boat
And-
lifts too. And it's not just the
And you
docks, it's
know,
the boat
I mean,
lifts too.
People buy their boats, maybe it's ego, maybe it's love of the watercraft, they're not gonna be happy.
No,
You
because
go
they bought
tell
that
them-
canal
You go
lot
back and tell them
because,
your boat's too big.
yeah. They bought that canal house because they wanted to be
Because
able
they wanted the
to
boat.
put that boat in there.
The house has nothing to do with it.
I mean, just saying they bought a house on the canal just so they could have that access
Yeah,
to
the
the
house has
water.
nothing to do with their decision, it was all about the boat.
Right.
And now you're gonna walk up and say, need a smaller boat.
I'm doing what y'all tell me you want me to do. I'll give you all the information I can.
Course
I
I-
checked, and I may have missed somebody, but I don't think I did, and I asked Cama if they knew of anybody, and they said, didn't they say no, but they, yeah.
They said they bought one subdivision in Sunset.
They knew about Ocean Eye, that's the one they told me about. And of course, when I went and looked, I couldn't find anything, that doesn't mean I missed it, but I just don't think it's out there. Maybe in New York. I think most people, like you said, got good sense, plus how often do boats run up and down against each other in canals? I've been in the canals a lot, and there's usually not no traffic jam in there.
No. No, because everybody's not usually going out at the same
And it's
time.
like a waterway too, you're gonna wait on a bigger boat, it's gonna get out of his way or something. So,
But I guess on the waterway, they don't let, there's some rules, I'm sure, on the waterway, aren't there, that they can't go out so far?
the pierhead lines, they're not allowed to go out into, there's a portion of it's like 60 feet from the navigable channel.
Mm-hmm.
They're not allowed to go out there. And so they get, I don't know how they do it, I guess they do it with GIS, determine how far out they can go. And we could do the same thing, but GIS, you know, is not accurate. It's not accurate to like 3 meters, which is 9 feet, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not in the canals.
yeah.
Is there a chance that this is an issue that would self-regulate?
No,
I mean, if it's too big to get through the canal, then there's clearly a problem,
Right.
you know?
it's kind of like being a good neighbor kind of thing.
Yeah.
Lord,
Yeah, that doesn't.
y'all ain't never worked in this job
Yeah.
before.
First guy there gets his boat lift and don't want that next guy having a boat lift.
Yeah, last one.
You don't sign off, you know.
I've been saying that for 40 years. The last one to get something here is the last one that thinks somebody should get something here.
That's exactly right.
All of them are like that.
Yeah, they are.
I got mine close
So
to
I-
8.
I don't know, I think I'd be in favor of trying to figure out if you just
Not
have the
opposed to figuring
navigable,
out something.
the navigable width now, and then, like Tim said, maybe give the other ones. You know,
We
you
could
set
put
that,
that-
you set the head based on where the boat is, you can only,
The only thing
Encroach
that I
here.
really could think of would be determine where the center of the navigable channel, what we consider the center of the navigable channel, and pull back from that. And then put the burden on the property owner to meet it. That's the only thing I could,
Mhm.
in other words, they would have to, they came in here after they went to CAMA and got their permit. And after they got a contractor to put it in, somebody's gonna have to go get a surveyor to determine exactly how far it could go out in order to meet our ordinance, and then bring us that design for us to approve.
and then,
But does that solve the problem of I park my boat on my day dock and it sticks out in the channel? And my neighbor can't get past me?
No. And that's the problem.
It don't solve any of the problems, it just lines all the piers, all of it, because,
I know.
seriously, think about it, none of it solves the problem, because this actually probably comes as close as anything you've ever seen.
I was just gonna say that
Mhm.
it's, the alignment is the edge of the boat, maximum
Yeah.
distance out with that, and that gives people on the canals as much flexibility as I guess is, you know, then it's up for them to figure out if it's gotta be shortened too much, you're gonna hit bottom, or you need a flat bottom boat, or what, you know, so.
Also, as we mentioned earlier, enforcement, right? Like who's patrolling the canals?
Tim's Navy.
Right.
Yeah.
Didn't they?
And then you've got the, I only put it there for an hour. The rest of the time it's on my boat.
Kayak.
Well, it's just like this guy that's down there now.
Do y'all know that since I've been
It's
here, I've
blocking
checked the
the thing.
bulkheads every year except for last year? And you know whose boat got used to check the bulkhead? Mine. Leave it
well, don't sell it, you may need it again.
Probably get some kind of reimbursement per hour and motors run.
Never
Yeah.
have,
We
never
might
have.
could build a special dock
Kinda
on a
like
canal
using your
for
own
you.
vehicle.
There you go.
It's
Give
just like this,
give me a paddleboard.
Yeah, before.
it's just like this guy now he's out there and he really doesn't care. And so if somebody has a complaint, they really don't have nothing to follow them. But if we write this thing that's gotta be navigable 6 or 8 feet from the center, just like that, then the guy who's complaining can go to him and say, hey, look, you're out of whack, or the police can go, or whoever goes over and says, listen, you need to either move your boat or reposition your dock, but you're clearly in the navigable channel. And that's a,
Y'all can recommend this to go to the board. I can take this to the board.
It isn't bad.
that's a guy, I think it's written pretty good.
Okay, and if y'all want me to take this to the board, I'll take this to the board, and we'll have them put it in the regulatory section instead of the land use, then we don't have to write a consistency statement, and it'll be a law kind of instead of a zoning code enforcement kind of thing. They put it regulatory, we might still be enforcing it, because I'll have to write who enforces it when I write it, but, you know what I mean?
Then it's really only be on a case needed when it comes up as somebody complaining.
Well, we'll
about
do
it,
like
as
we do
opposed
other
to-
things, we'll do it on a complaint-driven basis only. We won't be out there patrolling the sea, but if somebody files a complaint, we can go out there and
That's
try
right.
to determine if they're in violation or not.
Yep.
And how would you do that? I mean,
And let's just, well, I have an idea, if we were if the Board of Commissioners were to approve this, right, and someone called me and complained about the boat just now sticking way out past the dock, the
Mhm.
rear end of it is, right, then, I would think that we would be able to take the average of the lots on both sides, determine what the center is, right?
mhm.
And then pull off of that. We can measure from where they're at to the center to see if they're encroaching on that 20-foot, 10 feet on either side. That's gonna be hard to do.
Yeah, so how do you do that?
No, I
I
mean, that's
mean-
gonna be hard to do, to keep 10 open feet on either side in the canal.
Not for sure.
Huh?
For sure, that's gonna be hard to do.
If I had a small boat, I'd be complaining about everybody, I'd start them off.
Yeah.
But that may be the only way.
Well,
And then how do you bring them into compliance? Do you do it with a new boat or a new dock?
Doesn't matter.
One of them.
Yeah,
Just need to get your boat somewhere else,
yeah.
right?
How much time do you give them to come into compliance?
Well, if you pass the ordinance and you don't add a grandfather clause, then the first person that got complained on and run in compliance will be the first one that has to fix it. Of course, you know what they're gonna do. Well, I got that under.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you later. That's where they'll head, that's where they'll go. But
But how long do you give them?
you gotta figure out that you want it or you don't want it, and,
You
maybe
give
the
'em-
person that instigated this will be,
But do you give them 30 days to fix it, 5 days to fix it?
oh, you mean if we
Yeah.
give them notification?
Yeah,
There's rules and regulations when you do notification, you can't give somebody an unreasonable time,
mm-hmm,
even if it's even if it's a regulatory. Typically, what we do is we require you, once you get the notification, to get back in touch with us within 15 days and tell us what your time period is. And if it's reasonable, then we'll agree to it. If it's not reasonable and we don't agree to it, and you don't do nothing, then usually 30 days later, we send out another notice, and then this will have fines. It'll probably say 30 days, you have 30 days to come in compliance, or you start paying a daily penalty of, say, $100 a day.
mm-hmm.
That is perpetual. Every day is another fine. And that's the way most of them read. So, I'll give you an example. In the past, when we've had people that have had code violations, we send the letter out. If they call me back in 15 days and tell me, we've got the letter, we accept it, right? We put a note on it, which means they've been served, right? And we intend to say in 3 months to remedy the problem. Then we will send them a letter back saying, we've talked to you, we've addressed it, you have until this amount of time in order to remedy the problem. So we're actually working with the people that need compliance. And we do that based off of how big a hazard it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, or safety issue, because we have some that we say, no, it's right now. You either fix it today, or we're gonna fix it for you, kind of thing, and we've done that. So, that's, you know what I mean?
Well, the tough part for you is people love their boats more than they love their spouse, and more than they love their house. You're playing with fire.
Well, to start off with, if you send this to the board, you play with fire. I didn't make the decision.
Yeah, but you're there so they can get their hands around
No,
your
and
neck.
then
He's gonna
I
go
remind them every day.
PETE.
I say this to people every day. I don't write the rules, I just enforce them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
He's
they,
sign
Yeah, listen, send them over, man, I can handle it.
what's that?
I
He's
got
got
my
to
skin
sign
about
it,
that
don't
thick.
No, he don't have to sign it. If y'all vote to send this up to if y'all vote for me to take this to the board in an ordinance form, that's what I will do. And he don't sign nothing on this one. He had to sign the other one because it's land use. Land use required, the planning board has legal authority over everything that gets sent to the board. It has to come to y'all for land use. And that's why you have to write a consistency statement. That's required by law for the Cameron Land Use Plan to make sure that the comprehensive plan that we've had approved by the state is not being violated. So, there are some things the town wants to do, our comprehensive land use plan won't let them do. Can't do it.
I mean, is there a situation?
Right now, we can't put in some monster sized marina, we can't do it. Because our land use plan actually frowns it. Remember, we actually put a recommendation in there to change that.
Is there a situation where, well, let's just imagine a situation where somebody says they're cited, they start getting fined every day, whatever the amount is, and they say, I'm just gonna pay that. That's a drop in the bucket for me, you know? And it just, nothing changes. Is there a situation where
We
that
would
just-
go, what we would do is that, most of them that do that, if it's a drop in the bucket, won't pay the fine. Because they don't care, like you said, they won't pay the fine. And what we end up doing is that we end up going through the process, through the nuisance process, which is in the next law up, which will allow us to abate the nuisance, and then the money spent gets added to their property. Which means the next time they either want to sell it, or when the taxes go out, that money is actually attached to it. The best example is, I've probably done that 8, 9 times since I've been here, where people didn't abate, when we issued an order, they didn't follow the abatement, and then we had to take action, and then the cost of that action got added to their taxes.
Okay.
I have to take an ordinance to the board when that happens. In other words, the board, I take an ordinance to the board, the ordinance appropriates the funds for me to do the damage, and then that same ordinance says that it will be charged to the payment. Macy's, remember Macy's down there? Yeah, they ignored me, we took that down.
So in this case, you'll be moving their boat for them.
The Fulford place down here, the 2 houses down here, the Fulford place down here, which by the way has a history lesson for the Board of Adjustments on it. But that place, they kept ignoring me. Town tore it down and charged back to their taxes. I can go down the list, but that was right there. Remember that beautiful thing that was at 127 right there?
Mhm.
10, 11 years, 12, 13, how long have I been here? 14 years ago? You came off the bridge, it was the worst looking house I'd ever seen in my life, sitting there. I'll never forget, driving across that bridge going, oh hell, what have I got into? And there was 26 of them things on the beach. I got rid of every one of them. And there was a stack of those, about 6 of them. We had to get ordinances to have tore down. I thought 191 was gonna be one of them, but they stepped to the plate. But yeah, we do that all the time, and that's the way it would happen, is that we would take action. I would carry, in order before we would do that, we would go through all the process, the attorneys would be involved, then we would write an ordinance that would give me permission to take action, you know.
Okay.
Which means, I would imagine, that would mean tearing their pier down and moving it back so the boat ain't in the center of the channel,
Yeah.
not getting rid of the boat. That's what the action would
So I make a motion that we, do what Tim suggested and send that ordinance to the commission for them to, put it in the rules or in the regulation,
Or at least to consider it.
to consider it, yeah, to consider that.
So you want me to put it in ordinance form and carry it to them for the.
Correct. Anybody second?
I'll second it.
8 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Me,
Got 1 opposed, 5 to 1.
It's actually regulatory, so they don't have any say-so in it anyway. This is more like,
Who opposed?
what do you call it, a courtesy call.
I think
Ms.
Sylvia
Pate?
abstained.
Now, y'all have to do more, you may have to do more work if they decide to put it in the land use. Then it's coming back and we gotta do it.
Just
No,
taking the
that's more,
investigation
I
and all
think that's
that.
more like a speeding ticket than,
looking at the top of the canal owners.
Boomerang ordinance comes right back.
Okay,
Not
so
happy.
I'm sure.
I think the number 6 here, we've already done that. They just consider approval of consistency statement. Done that. So any comments? And the last thing is adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.